Hi everyone, welcome to Come Together. It's Deborah Mann. Thanks for joining. Today I am speaking about generational trauma. What does that mean and how does it affect us? If you come from a dysfunctional family, let's say you're born into a family with a couple of siblings, you stay with your mother. So your parents divorce, you're young, and your life gets even worse because your one parent that's taking care of you can't really manage. What happens? Well, firstly, every single sibling, the three of you, will experience trauma differently for a few reasons. The first one is when your mother had you, let's say you're the oldest, however long the gap was between you and then your sibling, she's a different person to when she gave birth to your sibling. So let's say it was 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. She's not the same person. And by that stage, the marriage or the partnership is not the same. So ostensibly, you're growing up with a different frame set from your mother, each of you. So all of you will have suffered trauma, but differently. However, the effects will then determine how you interpreted your trauma. So when you were born, let's say your parents were happily married and your mother was in a really good space, and then your parents' relationship starts souring, and now your mother is not in the same frame of mind and your father is not in the same frame of mind. So let's say he starts to drink or your mother starts to drink. But for this example, I'm going to say your father starts drinking and things start to fall apart. So your mother is highly tense, very distressed, and then when the last one's born, there's another story. Maybe the father's gone, and so it's just while your mother was pregnant, father leaves, mother is now alone. She has to raise 3 children. She's going to raise you all differently, depending on your age. So let's say you're 10 years old, and your sibling is 7 years old, and your other sibling is 3 years old. Your sibling is going to experience different trauma because at this point your mother's not going to have the same kind of time she had for you. She doesn't have the same time for you or your sibling, actually, because she's trying to deal with her own trauma. So the last sibling is born, and by that stage the father's gone, the mother's alone, and she falls apart. That's our example. What happens? So generational trauma is not what's passed down necessarily. There are some genes that are inherited, which gives you a predisposition to certain mental illnesses. Not all. You're going to experience your trauma differently, and what it's known as also, someone told me, which is a very good word for it, it's called the loop of horror. Because what will happen, you might find you all split up as adults. So as children, you're very close together. While parents are split up, you cling to each other for support and comfort. If your mother is unavailable, meaning that she's distressed, she can't cope. So you cling to each other, and you might have a very strong family unit when you're children. But when you grow up, you might find that you want nothing to do with your siblings. Why is that? That's generational trauma. Because every time you hear from one of your siblings, if you had to fight to compete with each other for mother's attention when father was gone, when you hear from one of your siblings, it triggers a trauma response in your brain, a memory, and a feeling. Would rather stay away because it's easier that way. Which is very sad, because children who grow up together, holding on to each other in a dysfunctional family, tend to grow up and split because the trauma of what went on when you were still young and you needed each other is gone, And this is when I say trauma is not what happens to you, it's the effects. So the effects of the trauma of when you were all young is that you don't want to speak to each other because it brings up memories of when you were young, or it evolves into something else. If you were very competitive with each other to try and get the most attention, which is normal. It's not abnormal to do that. It's not selfish to do that as a child. Children are by nature, the super horrible word to use, but they are narcissistic by nature. They have to be in order to survive. So it's not that kids are narcissists, of course they're not, but they need attention, they need to survive. You might think to yourself, why can't I have anything to do with my siblings? What is it? Well, your siblings have grown into different people than you have because you've all experienced a different kind of upbringing, if that makes sense to you. So if you look at it that way, so mother was 30 when she had me, she was 35 when she had my sibling, and then she was 40 when she had my next sibling. During those 10 years, mother's going to be 3 different people, depending on her circumstances at home. And of course, she's maturing as well, and she's learning a lot. So you're not going to experience the same childhood. So generational trauma is when the loop of horror keeps going, meaning you learn a pattern of very destructive ways in order to cope, and you pass it on to each other. And when you speak to each other, that seems to come up again and again and again. And that's why so many families, siblings, when they're adults, split and don't speak to each other. They just go no contact because of the trauma. So if that's happened to you, please know you're not alone. There are millions of families that have split up in their older years because of what's happened when they were young. And you'd think the opposite would happen. You'd think, but we were so close. Why aren't we close anymore? Well, that's why. You've each gone your own way. You've each forged your own path. And you might still, even though you're adults, you might still be vying for attention wherever you are, whether it's your workplace. It depends on how your brain programmed itself to survive the trauma. So you're not going to all come out the same way. Now you all have the same disorder or dis-ease or certain personality traits. That won't happen because you all grew up differently. So if you look at it that way, it will help you understand your siblings better if you're having a problem with them or if they're having a problem with you, because sad as it is, that's what trauma does. Trauma on a child is absolutely devastating and has lasting effects until the trauma is worked on. So healing is absolutely possible, but that's basically generational trauma. And so when you have children, you don't want to pass on the same mistakes that you were subject to. Best to get to, that's the way it is. That's what it was. And so you see how these things happen. Mother falls pregnant, has a few children, everything falls apart, the whole family goes to pot, children stick together because they've only got each other, and then they have to fight for attention, and mother gives one more than the other, or father gives one more than the other. And then as you grow up, you're developing different personalities, and you each have to make your way in the world after surviving from a very traumatic childhood. And so give yourselves a break. If you're not talking to each other or you can't deal with your siblings because it triggers trauma, then that's what it is. It's generational trauma. It can be worked on and it can be healed. Thanks for watching. If you have any comments, please put them in the box below and let me know if you want me to do a video for you. I will with pleasure. I'm Deborah Mann. Thank you for watching and welcome to my new subscribers. Very, very welcome here at Come Together. Have a great day, guys.